soil. And it also, the trees and shrubs no longer have their branches and leaves to help intercept the rainfall as it comes down. So when there's no vegetation, that rainfall is directly impacting the soil. And so if enough erosion occurs and if enough sediment builds up within the watershed, the stormwater runoff can kind of turn into this dense fluid. Think of something similar to like a wet concrete. And so these mud flow and debris flow type hazards, they can transport trees and boulders and generally cause much more destruction compared to something like a typical flood hazard. So because of that, we've been working with the county to kind of pinpoint where we think the higher relative risk areas are. And generally speaking, that's communities that are either within the burned area or that are directly downslope of a burn area. And the higher hazard probabilities generally occur when you have really steep slopes, if you have really loose soils, if there was a high burn severity, or if you have a really large drainage area. And so just to give an example, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Oh, hey, Sergeant Wilder, can you give me screen sharing access? There we go. So right now on my screen, I'm zoomed in on the community of Cascadel Woods. This is just for an example here, and if for some reason you can't see my screen, give me a holler. But you can see the red line here is the Creek Fire burn perimeter, and everything to the right of that red line was burned by the Creek Fire. So if we look at the watersheds that drain down into Cascadel Woods, they're kind of ranked in terms of low, medium, and high hazard probability. So as you can see, there's some pretty large red drainages, and these would be drainages that were either severely burned, they have those steep slopes or loose soils, and they make their way down through the community before reaching Whiskey Creek, which flows through there. So Cascadel Woods, for example, would be an area that's at increased risk of being affected by one of these hazards, at least from the Creek Fire, compared to, say, the town of North Fork, which is a little bit further away from the burn perimeter and isn't directly downslope of some really steep topography conditions. And that's not to say that the debris flow couldn't occur through the town of North Fork. It's just saying that the community of Cascadel Woods would be at a higher risk relative to that area. So this was just one example. We looked at a bunch of other communities around the county and identified where we thought there was a higher risk of this type of hazard occurring and where there was still some risk, but maybe not as high of a risk. So in the red here, you can see are some communities at higher risk, and these are generally within closer to the burn area. So there's Cascadel Woods, down along Road 225, going down to Redinger Lake, around Saginaw Creek, up along Mammoth Road, heading over to Kingsman Flat, Hogue Ranch areas. So anyway, you can take a look at this GIS portal. It's on the Madera County website. And if your house happens to be in one of these yellow or red zones, that doesn't necessarily mean your house is going to be directly impacted by one of these debris flow hazards. But it could mean that the road that you drive on to access your house could be affected, right? And if you live in like a low-lying drainage channel or have experienced some flooding in the past, you could be at an increased risk this year and for the next few years even. So anyway, this is a tool just to make you guys aware of where you are relative to the different risk zones. And this year and for the next couple of years, it'll just be especially important to be prepared to evacuate if you're asked to do so by the sheriff's department, and to just be paying close attention to the weather forecast, so you know when these larger rain events are passing through. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gerald with the National Weather Service.
All right, thank you, Chase. So real briefly here, I want to talk about kind of what the weather we've seen so far and what that means for debris flow. Most of the rain we've seen yet far has been pretty light as intensity, and intensity is really what we look at when we look at flash floods and debris flows, is how heavy that rain comes down, you know, that deluge that the supervisor spoke about. So far, we've had some pretty light stuff, but when you, even with our lighter stuff, because the sediment is so light, it will float down and move into the channels. So we look at this in a very tiered approach in how we're advising the county and Forest Service staff in the hazards on a given basis. So generally speaking, these lighter rains are going to stay within the channel. You might have a little bit of sediment in some smaller drainages, some places that typically pond up and those kinds of things. But as we start to get to more intense rainfall, that's when we start to really see the sediment load build out of the drainage. Now, as Chase mentioned, most of the time these will follow the creeks and tributaries and those like situations as they move through. But with debris flows in particular, once they hit an object, they will dam up and can divert. So keeping our channels clear and those kinds of things is very important. Now, looking out going forward for the next month or so, things do look pretty dry still. That's good and bad news. The good news is we're not expecting any intense rainfall in the next month or two, and the winter actually looks on the dry side. Bad news on that, the less precipitation we get this season, the more prolonged this event could be and the hazard will exist because it doesn't have a chance for the vegetation to regrow. The next real system we're expecting is right around Christmas, somewhere between Christmas Day and probably the first of the year, and most likely in that weekend time period. But the other mitigating factor that will exist for us will be snowpack. Once snow is on the ground, once you get about 2 to 3 inches of snow and it starts to stay, the hazard for debris flow lessens. It doesn't go away, but it does lessen because the ground is covered by the snow. We do have two hazards that can come out of that. We have what we call rain on snow events. So those are our big Pineapple Express type storms, kind of similar to what Supervisor Wheeler was talking about that happened in 1998. Those type of events, the warm rains come on top of it, melting the snow. So you have not just the rainfall, but the intense added to the intensity is the snow melt itself. And then, of course, once our snow begins to melt, that and how quickly it melts will bring potential in the future. So that's pretty much all I have for now. So I will hand it off to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerald. So I'm Stephanie Agneson. I'm the Director of Water and Natural Resources for the county. Jeannie Hobbin is our Deputy Director, and we have 4 PowerPoint slides that we'd like to share. I'm going to stop my video for bandwidth reasons and take a look at the slides with you. So this is not a glamorous topic, but we are going to talk for a moment about insurance. So floods are actually nationwide the most common and costly natural hazard. And a common flood claim, the average amount of a flood claim is $42,000. So that's why we're talking about insurance. So what you need to do is take a look at your current insurance policy and see what is covered in terms of floods. You may not have flood coverage. Now would be a better time to know that than after a flood. So take a look at your policy. Consider whether you may want a separate flood insurance policy. And again, this is not glamorous, but it is important to know what coverage you have for flood events. You will, and I know this is a community used to evacuating, you will need to make an evacuation kit, an emergency kit, and know routes away from your property. Make sure you put your important papers in a waterproof place rather than just a fireproof place as well. Make sure you have a recent inventory of possessions and have estimates of their worth. And a lot of this information is on floodsmart.gov. And I know that it's familiar to those of us who live in high fire hazard zones, but it's very similar and yet different because of the threat of water. I will post a link in the chat as well that has some of this information. So you will need to create a personal file that just has your inventory in it. You'll want your insurance policy in there, your household inventory, and if you have kind of jewelry that has value to it or art, you will want to have a recent appraisal to it. And then just keep copies of all of these documents, including any financial records that would be a pain to retrieve. Keep all of that in a waterproof container. Jeannie's going to talk a little bit about what you can do on your property now. You're mute, I think, Jeannie.
Aha, found it. When you go share screen, it disappears. So I had to find it. Yeah. Sorry about that. I am Jeannie Haben. I am the Deputy Director with Water Natural Resources. I work with Stephanie. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about how to prepare your house for floods and for debris flow. Make sure you clear your debris from your gutters around your house and your downspouts. You want to anchor down anything large, especially fuel tanks, because you don't want those going off and then possibly causing a fire someplace else. Check any fire stations for sandbags. Now, sandbags, you call first to make sure. But if you have any fire stations around you, all of them have sandbags. Sorry about that. All of them have sandbags. Bring your own shovel when you go. They will also have sand. There's usually a 10-bag maximum, so keep that in mind. And you might want to look up on YouTube or one of those sites for how to fill sandbags. There's kind of a method to it. You don't want to fill it up all of the way. You want to be able to carry it away. So 2 or 3 shovel loads will do, and then you tie it off and take it with you. So make sure you make sure you know where there are sandbags available, and then move all of your furniture and valuables to a safe place. Then develop that emergency plan that Stephanie was talking about. You want to make sure that you have a kit, drinking water, first aid, blankets, flashlights, radios. You want to have batteries for those things. So just make sure you have all the things. And again, we're used to this because we do fire, emergency things all the time. So you want to make sure it's kind of the same thing, the valuables that you have. Post all your emergency numbers so everybody can find you, and teach your children, if you have little ones, how to dial 911. It's important for them to know that at an early age. Plan and practice those flood evacuation routes, just like you would a fire evacuation route. Where do you meet? Where do you go? What are your ingress and egress? Then ask any out-of-state relatives or anybody from farther away. 1, if there's a place you can stay out of the area if something goes on. And 2, that there's an emergency contact out of the area, so they know to find you or to contact you to make sure it's all good. And then make sure you watch out for your pets and your livestock. They're part of the family too, for the most part. So you want to make sure there's a way to get them out of the area as well. So that's all I have. And I can pass it on to the U.S. Forest Service.
Okay, good morning. This is Todd with the Forest Service, Todd Ellsworth. I was the Creek Burn Area Emergency Response team leader, but I'd like to discuss some of the different phases of rehabilitation and where we're at with those different phases, as well as talk a little bit more in depth about burned area emergency response, the BEAR program, emergency stabilization, and how we've collected some of the data and shared some of the data that you've already heard from the Weather Service and from the consultant. So there's different phases of post-fire rehabilitation and repair. We have a suppression repair, which is basically fixing what the impacts were to putting out the fire. Obviously on this fire, there were lots of dozer lines in areas, especially, around some of the communities, and lots of dozer lines around Central Camp and those areas. And we pretty much, in addition to expanding some of our existing roads, putting in a dozer line or expanding, enhancing those roads as a more of a fuel, try to make those a fuel break. And drop point, you see lots of drop points and signs for drop points around the community. Drop points on going up Basor Road and Minaret Road and those types of areas. Repair those and other types of areas that we use for suppression repair, like helicopter points and those types of things. So we've done most of that repair up to this point, and there was, in the heat of the battle, there was a shortage. There's so many fires in California and out west. There was a shortage of resources, so some of it got delayed a little bit longer than we'd like. But most of that, especially the dozer line and hand line repair, is critical to get done before winter, as part of those areas can have erosion and cause sedimentation in our stream channels and on our road, causes erosion on our roads and those types of things. So we try to repair those as quick as we can, and we've done most of that. And then the second phase of rehabilitation is the BEAR program, or emergency stabilization. And we basically come in when the fire is starting to wind down a little bit, maybe 40 to 60% contained on the creek fire. We came in a little bit earlier to start doing some of our assessments, because we knew that this was a large fire and we wanted to start identifying what the burn mosaic is, what the burn severity is, and what some of the critical values at risk might be, and starting to share that information with the Weather Service, with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, with the counties, with the tribes, with Southern Cal Edison, with PG&E, with all the partners, to start help people start preparing for the winter and preparing for post-fire flood response. So as a few people have discussed before, we focus on areas of high and moderate burn severity, and those are generally considered the flood source areas. We start getting higher hill slope erosion. There's a higher potential for debris flows in those areas. So we one of the first products we do is map that mosaic, map the burn severity, and then we send that to the United States Geological Service, USGS, to get our debris flow modeling, which the Weather Service uses, which a lot of the other entities in the county uses, as part of this meeting, to develop our risk assessments and post-fire flood risk assessments. So we work really closely with them. But we also map out hill slope erosion, post-fire channel conditions, and try to characterize those things in cooperation with the other partners. And one of our most important jobs is sharing that information, having that dialogue, which we've done throughout this process with the affected entities, and making sure that people understand what the post-fire risks are. So this is an important piece of all that. Some of the things that we're paying attention to on the National Forest side, in addition to providing that baseline information of the assessment of the overall fires, looking at the Minaret Road, Mammoth Pool Road, Grizzly Road, Bayshore Road, some of those main access points in the in Madera County into the forest, into some of our high value recreation sites and high interest recreation sites and other areas such as Mammoth Pool. So we've developed a bear plan that's been approved by our regional office and Washington office that includes a pretty robust roads package in terms of trying to stabilize some of those areas. We have high risk around Whiskey Ridge and Chiquito Ridge. There are a lot of areas of high and moderate burn severity in those areas, going up to Mile High Summit, including a lot of areas in the French fire that was 2014 reburned. And so we're concerned about post-fire flooding and debris flows coming off of Whiskey Ridge and Chiquito Ridge areas specifically, and some areas higher up in the wilderness too. So based on that, we're looking at doing some stabilization on those roads as much as we can. We've got some done before winter. Obviously, winter is here and coming. So we also are concerned about we're also doing some stabilization and hazard tree removal around some of the campsites, campgrounds, recreation areas that were burned, and trying to stabilize those sites for the winter. A lot of the recreation sites in and around the area, like on Placer and Sweetwater and Fish Creek and some of the other ones, suffered quite a bit of damage. A lot of the campgrounds got burned. So the forest will be looking at which areas to try to fix the soonest based on use and public input and public use, and getting those things. So we just wanted to get those things stabilized before the winter and try to reduce some of the, if we do have, we didn't want hazard trees falling on infrastructure that was already existing. So we prioritized that. Also looking at hazardous material stabilization around some of the Forest Service infrastructure that burned. We're doing that right now. So the weather kind of shut us down for a little bit, but we're going to start back up on there, like around Sweetwater and Mammoth Pool area and Minaret Work Center. We had a lot of infrastructure that burned in those areas. We're doing that. And then, so that's emergency stabilization, and we'll also be looking at what infrastructure burned and trying to get funding to replace some of that infrastructure in our recreation sites and campgrounds in those areas. And then that's trying to get money for that and implementing that. And then longer term, it's identifying which sites to repair first and get those up and running, rebuilding the infrastructure, campgrounds, and then looking at what areas for vegetation removal and revegetation and those types of things. So it's going to be a long, this fire recovery is a long process. So definitely need everyone's input and coordination and continued good coordination with all the affected entities and cooperators. So that's all I have.
Mr. Tellsworth, this is Supervisor Wheeler. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for all that. I really appreciate it. I see I've been up in my cabin at Cedar Creek a few times, working up there too, trying to do the same thing. But yeah, on Grizzly Meadow Road, I go both ways so I can see what's happening. I don't know if it's at your crews up there by Hogue Ranch, the Apple Orchard, and they got tons of trucks and stuff working on the roads and stuff. And then but going on the Grizzly Meadow Road, I see quite a few culverts that's got limbs, even parts of trees in them. And I've actually cleaned a couple of them out, but I'm just wondering, are we going to clean those out before winter gets really bad? And did I hear you say that on these campground stuff like Soda Springs and stuff, I see you really clean that up very, very well, in fact. Are you still going to be doing this next spring?
Yes. Yeah. So, we are trying to get a lot of that road work done, obviously with the fire burning so late in the year, and our funding mechanisms and contracting and stuff. Some things haven't gone as fast as we want them to. We are working on a contract to get that stuff done. And then, so definitely we want to do all those things. And then looking at, more work more work and stabilization will happen in the spring for sure.
Okay.
And really, looking at what the winter did and cleaning up the campsites, and then we're, at the forests got some money for, the Great American Outdoors Act, and we're also trying to get some additional funding to rebuild some of the toilets that burned, some of the other infrastructure that burned. It's a huge job, a lot of it, a lot of stuff both on Fresno County and Madera County side of the forest burned. A lot of the high value campsites, a lot of people like to use. So they're trying to prioritize which ones to go after in the funding. And so, it's going to be a long-term process getting those things back up and going for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed more on Mammoth Pool Road, there's a few spots where a tree fell across the Grizzly Meadow Road and it actually melted the asphalt. Is there any money due to fix some of that? I mean, there's some places like it's 100 yards long where it just melted the asphalt.
Yeah, we are looking at that, and it's not necessarily part of. It might be a more longer term rehab. It's not really part of the emergency stabilization funding source that we get, but definitely the engineers have noticed that, and we are trying to get. We are running up a package too, because some parts of the Minaret Road too burned. The asphalt burned on it, and so our high value roads like those in Basor where that happened, they're trying to get those things repaired as quick as we can.
Right. I don't know how they do that either. And then the last thing is, with my permit, I can't go. But I'd like to go up and see what Mammoth looks like up Mammoth Pool and the campground and stuff. But is the Mammoth Pool campground part of the emergency part of this? Because it's really a highly used one, and it's been shut down 2 years because of all the damn dead trees.
Yeah,
I would really like to see that cleaned up.
The Mammoth Pool campground was severely burned. A lot of the toilets burned, and so we've done some stabilization on that, and we're continuing to do some stabilization around there. And a lot of the infrastructure burned at Mammoth Pools, unfortunately. Yeah,
well, as long as we can just get it, if we're going to be doing this, let's do it right and get them all done, because.
Yeah. Well, I think, Mr. Wheeler, as we move forward, of course, the forest is going to be, engaging with you and other members of the community to identify which sites are the highest priority for recreation and public use that you'd like to see, repaired first. So I think, your input's critical into canvassing the community to see what the priorities are moving forward.
I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Okay, that's all I have for now. I'll be available for questions later on too.
Thank you, Todd. I'll go ahead and jump into the sheriff's office and the evacuation piece of this puzzle. And the first thing we like to touch on is the ready, set, go mentality. Jeannie touched on it a little bit ago. Just be ready. It's kind of in tune with the wildfire component of this. Make sure you have those essential items ready to go. Be watching them and knowing what's going on. It's really important because, especially with debris flows, they happen so quickly. A lot of times we're not able to even get to the mode of going door to door like we do with the fires. So it's really essential that you guys are ready to go, when we make that decision and get out as fast as you can, just because of the speed of how fast this transpires. The other thing is being signed up for our alert systems. Sheriff touched on this earlier. There are two different components to this system. First is MCAlert, which is our reverse 911, is what it's also called. And it's our way of reaching out to you directly and saying something's going on. With the power of this account, you can get on, you can change how it alerts you, you can have it go text message, call you, send you an email. There's a variety of different ways you can set it up. You can make as many accounts as you feel you need to alert you about what's going on. The biggest thing that we find with this is people don't spend the time in the account to really place their house on the map correctly. You need to spend some time with that GPS tool, because sometimes Google is off. And for us, most of the time when our dispatchers are creating these alerts, they're looking at a map and they're drawing a line on a map. So if your location is off, even by a couple hundred yards, you may not get an alert. So really spend time on that and make sure you're getting it correctly. So for those folks that aren't tech savvy, you're more than happy to pick up a pamphlet from the substation or the main office. You can get them online and send in handwritten information, and we can get a hold of you, get you entered into the computer, and make sure that that GPS pin is set correctly so you do get those alerts. The other component we have is our Nixle system. So this is text messages. This is countywide alerts. So this is not getting you a lot of like detailed information. This is more of a general type information source. So you kind of know what's going on countywide. And essentially all you do is you text your zip code to 888-777, and it enrolls you in those alerts. So you will get those alerts. But MCAlert is where it gets down to the exact street and the exact house of what we're evacuating. So we encourage you guys to sign up for both systems, because they work hand in hand to give you that overall awareness, but then down to the street level detail of what's going on in your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
The other item that we have come up with the Weather Service and with NGO and Water Resources is alert levels. You may have been seeing these earlier with Fresno County. We are sharing them with Fresno County. So if you do see something alerted for Fresno County, you're going to see the same thing from us. So basically, we sat down and worked out a tiered system of where our risk is depending on how much rain is forecasted. So a low event is, we're not expecting much. You're going to see some runoff and things like that. A moderate level, you're going to start seeing good volume of rain. You're going to see some mud. You're going to see some clogged culverts and things like that, but you're not going to see a lot of impact. Once we start getting into high and extreme, that's where we start having the concern about how much is coming and how much is going to start running down these channels. So those are those moments you guys need to be paying attention to the weather, knowing what's going on, and being aware that this could change quickly. Like Gerald touched on, those Pineapple Express storms where we get a lot of water in a short amount of time. Those are the moments that we're concerned with. So these thresholds kind of give us an indicator of what the storm is going to produce in a certain amount of time, of what reaction that the county and the sheriff's office needs to take to keep everyone safe. So with the weather advisory, you're generally looking at those 48 to 72 hours before the storm. This is the time you need to, start paying attention to the weather, knowing that, something is going on, something is going to change, and keeping track of that storm and knowing where you're going to go, what items you need to take with you, and just being in that ready mentality of if something changes, you're ready to go. So this is where in past years, our evacuation language has changed. We used to have a 3-step system. Now we just have 2. It's either warning or order. So an evacuation warning can be issued 48 to 24 hours before what's going on. And we characterize it as a risk to life and property. We sit down and we don't take it very lightly asking you to leave your homes. We understand that, that is your castle, that's your home. You have memories there. We try not to have you leave for no reason. We want to make sure that when we ask you to leave, it's a legitimate reason and there is some risk. So, at that time when we issue a warning, you need to start thinking about arranging some way to get out, making sure you're ready to go. Those folks with animals, that is always our hardest challenge, is getting the animals out. And most people, their animals are part of their family. And we understand that. And, this is the time that you need to take to start making those arrangements to get, especially those large animals, out of the area and somewhere safe where once the storm has passed, we can get them back in there. It's just the time issue. Like I said earlier, these debris flows move very quickly, and a lot of times we don't have a lot of time. So this is that opportunity you need to take of, I need to get stuff arranged. I need to get these animals moved and be prepared. The order is, there is an immediate risk to life. That's essentially what we're telling you, that your safety is in jeopardy and we need you to leave. When we do issue an evacuation order, we generally set up a temporary staging point for evacuations due to the pandemic issues. Shelters are not a easy thing to put together and keeping everybody safe. So generally we'll give you a temporary evacuation point that you need to go to. Our Red Cross partners will triage what's going on and make arrangements for you guys to have somewhere to go. We do like to tell people, we're not going to forcibly remove you from your house. But we want you to know that we're not going to risk a lot of people to come in to save you if you made that decision to stay. So for the safety of the first responders and yourself, if we decide that an evacuation order is needed, we would appreciate your help and heeding that warning and actually leaving. We are trying to be as careful with evacuation orders as we possibly can, drilling down to actual houses and not we're going to evacuate the entire subdivision of Cascadel. We're really trying to drill down, focus in on those houses we believe are at critical risk and get those folks out and providing that warning to everyone else. And getting everyone else back in as soon as we can. I know that's always a struggle of, especially with the fires, we don't see fire and we want to go back home. But we got to make sure that it's safe to get everyone back home. So that's a big thing with the evacuation orders. Some of the other things that we are working on, the board of supervisors approved a roadside message board at their board meeting earlier this month. That board will be a cellular controlled board, so we can quickly update the message going into the area that's impacted. So we'll have that online hopefully in the next month of being able to provide, as you're driving up 225, to say, the next storm risk is a low, medium, whatever the case may be. So we're really working on that, trying to get that out there to, that way you guys have some information if you're just driving in unaware of what's going on. The other thing is our Facebook feed. If you don't follow the sheriff's office on Facebook or Twitter or one of the other social media settings, it would be a good thing to jump on there. We're going to start pushing that information, sharing the National Weather Service information, and really pushing that information out to you guys. Some of the other things that we're working on, especially with the road department, is identifying some of our road crossings that are at higher risk and putting some mitigation steps to prevent losing the road in these locations. We recognize that a lot of these places are one way in, one way out, and we want to make sure that, you may not be evacuating because your house is at risk. It may be, we may lose the road and that may cut you off, cut your access off. So that's one thing to be aware of and kind of have an idea of what's going on and mitigating those risks as best we possibly can. So that is all I have for you guys on evacuations standpoint. Right now, I will open it up to the group and see if there's any questions that you might have for us.
I'd like to know how quickly the Forest Service will come back up.
Do we just start talking if we got a question?
Are you on mute?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I just have a question for the Forest Service. We live up on Kinsman Flat, and I guess my concern is how quickly will the Forest Service come and clear the road or clean up the road after a rain event? Because there's a number of huge boulders that are definitely going to come down on the road when it rains, besides, dead trees. But kind of like, what timeline does the Forest Service come up the next day to evaluate that? Or what would be the timeline of clearing the road?
Yeah, it would probably be when it's safe to do that after a storm, next day or next day after that, when it's safe to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question along the same line. Is that there's a tremendous, I mean, I don't know what they're doing. I'd like to find out what they're doing up above us on Kinsman. There's literally hundreds of trucks going up and down the road every day. And it's like, if you're going to be working up high, it's going to be important to keep the road clear. So I'm just curious about your plans to what's happening with that. And there's still a lot of trees that are, burnt and dead hanging over the road. Are they going to be just left to fall and have us deal with them? Or is there plans to clear any of that? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the trees, a lot of the bigger ones were addressed, taken care of. And the forest is looking at, probably a roadside salvage sale in the near future.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, but a lot of the big, and then the Asplund and Marbury, they're doing a lot of hazard tree falling and chipping of material and those types of things up there.
Great.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
That's what you see. That's what you see a lot of the trucks, and there's a by Clearwater Station, I believe they're staging. Asplund, I think, is staging a lot of equipment there, going up and down the hill.
Yeah,
and lots of helicopters.
Yeah, well, that's SCE's replacing power lines, power poles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just coming down and going up there the 4 or 5 times I did working on both roads. They have cut literally thousands of trees, not hundreds of thousands. I can't believe how many they cut down. It's one benefit from the fire is that they, all those dead trees from the bugs, they cut them down too, because most of them caught on fire and some of them are chimney fire burning right through the middle of them. And so they, I can't believe how many they've cut down, Chuck. So if there's a tree that you see that they haven't, let them know, because they got crews that went in there and they did one hell of a good job. So that's all I can say.
And there is no complaint in anything that I'm saying.
Okay,
you
good.
All have been doing it.
Know that I've seen it.
Yeah, no, and you were talking about the guys were up here like within a week or two after we came back to clean up around the tractor lines. No, everybody that we've dealt with and everybody going up and down the road, it's all been, these are all quality people doing a quality job.
Yep.
So cheers.
Joseph, this is being recorded, right?
Yes, it is. So that was the other thing I was going to segue into is this meeting was recorded, so it will be up on the county website. I put a link in the chat. If you go to the county webpage and click on Creek Recovery, all the debris flow information is up there. The map, the risk map is up there as well. So you're welcome to go in there and check your address and see where what risk you're at, and get some more information on some other stuff like flood insurance and things like that. There are links there as well.
Another question. Is there a way to get on the mailing list to find out about these meetings? Because Robert was nice enough to forward us an email about this, but had we not gotten that from Robert, we wouldn't have known this was happening.
So generally we post most of our community information up on our Facebook feed, so it is there. And that's where initially we had posted it to. And I believe Jeannie sent it out to most of the resource conservation districts as well.
Okay, well, for those of us that are low tech and have never been on Facebook, is there a way to
Hey,
get on the
Sergeant
email
Wilder,
list?
is it possible to use the those that have enrolled in the MCAlert system for something like this, or is that out of the scope of what we should be using it for?
Well, we could
That's a good idea.
we could use Nixle and use the Creek Fire keyword.
Or I could just ask Bob or Robert to keep sending me emails when there's stuff that I need, which is great. I know he would.
Well, all the people that registered, you know, to have their places cleaned up and FEMA and all that, Bobby had all that information. So he tried to get a hold of every person that has.
Yeah, and he
up.
did.
He did a
Hey,
great job.
Bob, you know, I don't know whether you go by Bob or Robert, both names, has done a quality job through all this in keeping us informed and making sure that we know it's available for us, which has been critical. So thank you. Good job.
And I call him Bobby. Babaloo sometimes.
Don't call me Susan.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Thanks.
So if you know anybody, Chuck, up there that has not signed up or anything, if they can get a hold of Bob or myself, we can get them signed up, and we will get a hold of anybody that when we have any kind of meetings like this. I know Joey always lets us know, and so we can spread the news around. So.
Okay, very good. And we do too.
And on January the 7th, I'm having a town hall, and a lot of this stuff will be available on that. We'll be talking about a lot of different stuff like this that's happened. And we might know more about weather then too. So it's from 6 to 8 on Zoom. So
Any other questions from anyone?
well, if there isn't, I want to thank all of you, all the presenters, the sheriff, Joey, Chase, Gerald, Todd, Stephanie, Jeannie, Forest Service, the whole crew. I'm going to thank you guys so much for all the hard work you're doing. And I'm amazed at what they're doing up there. I wish everybody could go up there and see it. You know, you can't. Maybe after January 6th, I think, when hopefully the order will be lifted and they'll be able to go up there if there's not too much snow, if we're lucky enough to have snow. But it's amazing work they've been doing. And I hated to even complain about the culverts, but I know every time we had a heavy rain at the ranch, we had probably 30, 40 culverts. I had to go make sure they're cleaned up because it sure takes out a road fast when they're plugged. So, but other than that, they're doing one hell of a job. That's all I can say. Thank you, Joey.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate both the panel members for taking time out of your busy personal lives, and also for the community members that took time to join us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Holidays, everyone.
Thank you
Take
guys.
care.
Happy holidays.
Be safe and healthy.
Yeah, keep your mask on, damn it. Bye.
Bye.